Alrighty, welcome to Wednesday workshops. We'll go ahead and get started right now. Looks like we already have one question. The question is, can we go over client portals / what it looks like and how you share it with clients? Yeah, absolutely. We actually just kind of touched on this a little bit earlier in our previous call. So I can kind of go a little bit deeper on it and kind of show you guys a little bit more about it. So client portal roles. When we're talking about inviting clients to the portal, it doesn't necessarily mean a buyer or a seller. It can be a broker. It can be a title officer. It can be a lender. Honestly, it's whatever party members you need to invite to open to close who need to see details on that particular transaction. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my 3 lines. For anyone who's brand new starting off in the system, you're probably not going to have properties or very many contacts to look at. So we're going to head down to our gear icon. We're going to head into our organization and users, and we're going to click on portal roles. This is one of the places that we can locate our portal roles. The other place that we can locate it is by going to a property and sending out an invite via the portal as well. So I like to show this first, just in case you're brand new and you're like, I already know who I want to send it to. I just want to set them up before I get my properties in here. You can head to your organization users, portal roles. These are going to pull up your portal roles. So as an example, I'm going to click on broker and owner. What I want you guys to take notice here is that right now, these are all of the available permissions. These available permissions here have been selected, and so we see them on this side as well. So this shows what permissions are now available to anyone who is assigned as the broker owner on that particular transaction. When I click on buyer here, I'm going to see available permissions. And right now the buyer only gets the details, documents, and the ability to download documents. I can update this and I can say, well, maybe I want them have access to the timeline as well. Selecting timeline will add it to that list. Now they have access to see the timeline for this particular property. You can also delete that timeline and it will remove that permission. Especially for anyone who's already assigned to this particular role if you needed to edit it. I'm fighting a little bit of a cough, so if I turn away and I cough, apologies for that. But this is where we would want to set up those client portal roles. Now, once we have them set up, again, I have a couple different versions in here. I've got the broker owner, the buyer 2023, which probably is a different version of buyer. It looks like that. We've got a co-agent, just in case you wanted to invite a co-agent and you're not on the, I believe it's on the pro and the scale plan. It might also be on the grow plan. I'd have to double check. But sometimes we can't invite multiple agents to one transaction. And so inviting them through this will allow them to see all the details, still be able to download documents, still be able to see the tasks, but they won't necessarily be able to like submit an intake form, that kind of thing. We've got a couple other ones down here too, a lender, a seller, every property role, and then a test. So I've added in quite a number of these. Once you've added in your roles, if you add them in here, we're going to exit out of our organization and users, and we're going to go to a property. I just clicked on Ivy Lane here. I'm going to head to contacts. When I'm under contacts, we can see here that we've got the name of the title role to the left of that contact, or to the right of that contact card. And then below that, we have that invited button. So right here, what this means is that Pam has already received an invite to this particular property as let's go ahead and click on it. And every property role, that's the role that's associated with them. Earlier today, when I was showing this functionality, I invited Hannah Hoxie to this. So myself to this, when I click on invited, it's going to show me the email that's associated with it. Here, the portal role, I'm going to go ahead and say it was the broker owner. I can send out another invite, but I have already received that invite, so I don't need to worry about it. When we're talking about sending out this role, if we're sending it out to a party member who already has an email with open to close, for example, if I put in Hannah Hoxie, I might not receive that. It might give me an error and say, hey, you've already have someone with this particular login. You can't create that same login again. What I usually suggest, and this is for like people who are like brokers, right? Maybe, or an agent who needs to be in open, to see have a client portal, but maybe their email's being used already for open to close. For a team member or a user, or a team member or an agent portal user, or maybe it's something like that. What I usually suggest is adding on some extra verbiage here. So I can put in + buyer. And what that'll allow me to do is it'll allow me to use the same email, right? This is still going to go to Hannah at open to close, but it'll have that plus buyer, and that kind of creates an alias of sorts that we can use. So once I've added in that, I can say send invite. The email, because we just did that today, let me pull that up for you guys, is going to look a little something like this. Let me see if I can pull it over. So it looks a little something like this. So here we can say, hello, welcome. It shows the email. So this one says Hannah plus client portal. I'd open to close. Here's the username. Here's the password. To show you guys what that client portal looks like, I'm going to go ahead and log out of open to close really quickly. We'll go ahead and grab that username, pop it into open to close. So the same login that you guys are using to log in is the same login that your clients can use to log in as well. So here they'll put in their username, their password, say log in, and this is what the client portal looks like. So right now it's just showing us the property and the property that they're associated with. When I click on this property, what I want you guys to take notice of is that this is the broker role. So Hannah has access to everything. They're going to be able to see the timeline, the details on this particular property, the documents, be able to email documents, upload or download documents if they need to. They're going to be able to see the contacts on this particular property, who the party members are. It says appraiser here, buyer's agent, listing agent. They're going to be able to see the tasks because I've given them permission to see the scheduled tasks, unscheduled tasks, and completed tasks, as well as any notes that have been shared with the portal. Notes are kind of cool because we can still exclude notes, right? As long as we have that excluded button selected, it's going to exclude them. Same thing with our tasks. If that excluded button was excluded on any of these tasks, those tasks would not show up here. Lastly, if you guys are on the scale plan, the person who gets that invite will also have the ability to send you messages. So here, if I needed to message anyone, let's say I'm a broker owner and I'm trying to reach out about a document. I kind of did that earlier where I located a document and I said, hello, I was looking for this document for compliance. Have you received it yet? What this message does is this message sends to our internal user, the person who owns that transaction, and they can view it. Kind of a deep dive on the client portal. Any questions on the client portal or how that works? Awesome. It's pretty cool to see this. I'm going to go ahead and log back out of this and we'll log back into my implementation demo account. Let me move my email back over. Alrighty. Looks like we've got another question. Can you explain the property table filters, please? Specifically, how would I see a list of those that I have closed? Great question. So what we're going to first do is if you guys have properties in your account, this is going to look very familiar. If you don't have properties, you can still set this up. We're going to head over to our little house icon right here. This is our properties icon. Once we're on our house icon, the first thing that we're going to take a look at is our tables. So up here at the top, if you do not have a table created, it's going to say create a table, or it's going to prompt you to create that table there. What you'll want to do is you'll click on create a new table. Oh, let me click on create a new table. Here you'd create that table. Let's go ahead and name this webinar. Let's pop in the date. Submit. Now that I've created that table, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear all of the statuses here. So now I have it where there's no filters set right now for this particular table. What I like to suggest for this when you're taking care of your tables and your segments, think of your table as your big bucket, okay? So this is going to be everything included, all properties on that current account show up here. Think of your segments as baby buckets, okay? So I usually create a segment called closed. I can create a segment called active listing / active. Or we could say pending listing. There we go. Let's do pending listing / active listing. I can add another one on here called buyer under contract because I might need to see specifically my buyers. And I can create another one called seller under contract. If I want to, I can create another version of this that's called just under contract if I need to. What I'm going to do from there is I'm going to go ahead and go back to our closed one. So I'm just clicking on that seller under contract, selecting close, and I'm going to update the statuses here. So what I'm going to do is where it says contract status, I'm going to select edit. Once I've selected edit, here we can see there's a long list of options. We're going to click on closed. We can also include expired or canceled or expired listing or terminated or archived, whatever other options we need. We can select more than one. When I say close on that, it's going to save all those filters. And now it's showing us the properties with those values. What I usually like to do next is click on my table columns. And I usually like to locate that contract status. So I believe mine is called file status right now in this account. Once I select file status, it's going to add it to the current table columns. I like to bring that to the very, very top and say update. Once I do that, here we can see the file statuses. So now I can click on file status and sort it by the file statuses and see these 3 were terminated, these 3 are closed. And the reason that these are coming in is because I have those contract statuses set up. Now, when I go to another, right now I'm not filtering based off of the contract client type. So this could be buyers, this could be sellers, either or. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to click back on that tables and segments, and I can go to another one, pending an active listing, click on contract status and update that to active listing. And then let's say pre-marketing. And if I had a pre-listing, or pending listing, I could do that too. We'll say close. And now that filter is only showing me properties with that. Click on table columns again, locate my file status if I'd like to. I can also bring on the listing details, commission details, intake questions if I need it. I can also go to my contacts and bring on any of my contacts if I need it too. Let's say you guys need to see your listing agents on this. I can scroll down until I see listing agent. Once I've selected them, I can reorder them. So now I'm looking at the file status, listing agent, listing agreement start date, and expiration date, and say update. Once I've updated that, now we can see all the ones that are in pre-marketing, active listing, and who their listing agent is. So this is how you can use those different tables and those segments to kind of drill down and create those drill down views. You can technically create segments that are all encompassing. So for example, this one's active listing. This is a table that's active listing. I might have some segments that are underneath it. For example, this one says expirations next month. And this might be helpful for me to just see a very drill down view of what properties are expiring next month. You can see here that it's pulling in that date automatically. The date range is determined based off of how we have that set up. So if we go back over to our webinar and we go to our pending and active listing and we click into the date range and I want to see next month, when I select next month from this list here, that is a dynamic, that is a dynamically updating field. So when I say next month, it's going to show me October right now because that's the next month for us. And when I get to October, it's going to update that and it's going to show us November next. So I like this tool because it's great for us to like keep it updated. Same thing with the next 7 days. It's going to update that and keep showing us the next 7 days. So right now it's the 6th. When it turns the 7th, it's going to change from the 7th to the 14th. So it's a super, super cool tool. Definitely check that out when you guys are looking through this. I'm going to go ahead and say clear though, because we're not going to look at that. Let me know if there are any other questions about tables and segments or how to set them up, or how to set up those filters. All right. Next question. I pinned a reoccurring task without a date, like I saw in the last workshop, week's workshop. Once I checked it complete, where does it go? What happens when it's time for it to show up again? So when we're looking at reoccurring tasks, so I'm going to go ahead and create one on this property really quickly. Let's go ahead and we're not going to pop in a choose date. We're just going to say reoccurring task. We'll go ahead and say submit, get that date created. I'm going to go ahead and filter it and search for reoccurring task. Here it is down here underneath unscheduled. We'll go ahead and mark that as a pinned task. It's going to bring it to the top. I'm going to click on our little inner details just to open up the settings for this. I'm going to head down to reoccurring. And then here, when I say 7 and I say update, what this is going to do is when I check off this task is technically marked as completed. What this means is in 7 days, so on Tuesday or Wednesday, next Wednesday, that task is going to come back up. But if I go over to my little 3 lines and 3 dot icon here, and I go to completed and I look for reoccurring, or here we can see it at the very top. Here's that reoccurring task. That's the last task that we checked off. Once 7 days has been completed, so next Wednesday, this task is going to pop up again. I can always click on the, once that task comes up, I can go through it and I can edit the due dates for it. But that's where that reoccurring task goes. It will go to the completed. And then once that time comes up, it comes back to active. Alrighty, next question. Can we go over Andrew's announcement from the weekend? What's the best way to utilize commission templates and when to set up trigger commission one sheet templates? I actually am not familiar with Andrew's announcement. He probably posted that on Facebook and I didn't get a chance to review it. I'll have to look into it first before we can go over it, unless my other team members know more about the announcement than I do. Emily, Jill, do you guys know about the announcement or any of the details?
I have not played with it yet. I did see now that we can trigger one sheets to go out. And it looks
wonderful.
I have not gotten into play with it yet. So
okay, wonderful. Oh, cool. This is a cool new tool that we just haven't had the chance to play with yet. Let's see if it's in the change log, because usually our change log is pretty up to date. And we'll see if it has that update in there. If not, I'll definitely take a look into it. Anonymous, if you're interested in looking more into that or learning more into it, definitely feel free to reach out to us in support. And we'll try to create a quick Loom video that we can kind of share on how that works. Let me see if I have anyone else, any of my other coworkers who might know a little bit more about that I can pull into to assist us with that particular question. For now, I'm going to go ahead and skip it just because I don't know what the announcement's pertaining to. It sounds like it's really cool that it can trigger one sheets automatically. That sounds fun. But we'll see. I'll need to read into it and test it out myself before I can share or go into it any deeper. Alrighty. Next question. I have a team that uses FUB. Can I connect my main account and see all the agents, or do I have to log in as each agent? So it depends. If you're a FUB user and you're connecting your FUB account, we're going to head down to our 3-line icon, down into our gear icon, into apps and APIs. Once we're in apps and APIs, we'll just want to make sure that that FUB account is connected here. Currently, I have my admin account connected to this account, so I'm going to be able to see that. When we're talking about team members or agents, if you have them already in open to close, we're going to go over to where it says agents. We'll go over and we can impersonate them. Once we've impersonated them, we can head over to their little lock icon. And here you can add in the agent's credentials as well. So it kind of just depends. Usually I suggest having yourself as the admin and have your admin key connected there. And then that agent API key, I would also suggest sharing that agent API key within here. When we have both of those set up, let's go ahead and take a look at a property. When I'm on that property and I go to the More tab and I go to Follow Up Boss, here we can see that we have that agent here, and then we have that implementation demo. That's the user who owns that account. So this is just an example of how you can see this is the person who owns that, or that this is the admin, and this is the agent that's associated with it. Now, when we're talking about pushing it over to different users and pushing that information over, it depends, right? Typically, the admin has access to all of the contacts within Follow Up Boss. So if I opened up my Follow Up Boss account, currently I'm logged in as the admin, so it's a little bit hard to see, but I'm logged in as the admin of the account. Here we see John Doe. Whoever has access to John Doe as well is going to be able to see their account. When we push over information to that, I'm going to go ahead and head over to our West Reading Street. I believe this one is connected to John Doe. So here's John Doe. It's connected to that. So this is connected to John Doe. Here we can see that it shows a different property. We can always select a different property from here. But right now, the fields are synced with this on West Reading Street. So when we push over that information, we can push it over to that contact. If that team member has access to that contact, they're going to be able to see that information updated. The main part where I see sort of the assignment or pushing in the information for the agent is going to be based off of the tasks. So when I go to this task right here and we click on assign task in Follow Up Boss, so all I did was click on our little drop down arrow. We'll go down to Follow Up Boss, assign task. Here for that API, we'll click on implementation demo. Here we'd select the user. So this is all of my different kind of users that I have right now. Some of these names probably look really familiar to you guys, but here I can select the specific user. If I wanted to push something over to Andrew, I can push it over to Andrew. I can search up that contact that particular task needs to be on, and then I can push that over, and that's going to push it over as a task that Andrew needs to complete. So this is how that kind of shows. Awesome. Looks like I'm getting some information from my coworkers about that original question that we had. Let me see if I can pull it up. Wonderful. Okay, cool. So back to that original question of the announcement that Andrew made about one sheets and commission templates. We've now built it out that we can have one sheets and commission templates trigger based off of intake forms, task triggers, and property triggers. So what does that look like? If we head over into our templates, so I'm going to head down to our hammer icon into templates. Let's say after a certain point in the transaction, you guys need that commission report to start being built. Maybe 2 weeks before close or 4 weeks before close, you need that commission template built. What you could do is you could head into your main buyer's task template. So here's my main buyer task template, and I could add in a task, and I could just say start commissions. I'm going to go ahead and call it that. We'll go ahead and say it's based off of a property date. Let's say it's business days. We'll say it's 14 business days before the closing. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and say 21 for this, just to give us plenty of time before closing date, and say add. Once I've added that on here, I can go over to our little trigger icon. It's that little gray icon. Some of you guys might have triggers already associated with the different tasks that you need to update. That's going to have a little red lightning bolt. But if you're creating a new task, it's going to have this grayed out trigger icon right here. When we click on it and I say add trigger, I can say when this task is marked as completed, what do I want to happen next? Well, I want a template to come on. When I say add, when we go through and choose the templates, it sounds like here's task templates. If I continue to scroll down, we've got document templates. Here's our trigger templates, date templates. Here's our commission templates and our one sheets. So if you guys want to have it built out that when this task is completed, it starts out that commission template, you can here select a commission template. If you want it to start out and start that one sheet template, you can have it start that one sheet as well. So this is super cool. We've been waiting for this for a really long time, so I'm really excited. Thank you for bringing this up so that I can now know about it too. Oh man, I'm excited about this. So here, I can grab Hannah's example and say add. I can turn that trigger on. As always, you're going to want to add in some details here. So I like to grab this and say add and then paste it in there. If you're on a Mac, you can use Command C. If you're on a PC, you can use Control C to just copy that. And then to paste it in here, you can use Command V as in Victor or Control V as in Victor. To paste that in here. And then again, when it's purple, we press enter. When it goes to gray, that means it's saved, right? So here's an example of a trigger that you can build out to bring on that commission template. Obviously, if you're on the scale plan, you can use different conditions on this particular trigger. Also, if you're on the scale plan, sounds like we can also build it out with our trigger templates. So if I go to my property field trigger templates, here's this main buyers under contract one. Sounds like I can say I wanted to add or remove a template, add the trigger. And the trigger that I can add for this, I'm going to go ahead and scroll all the way to the bottom and say, I want that weekly one sheet to go out. Here I can turn that on. And now we have a trigger that's built out that brings on that weekly one sheet. Once again, I'm going to say add weekly one sheet. And then maybe I'd want to add a condition here. If this one specifically, maybe I want to say, oh, I have to wait until inspection has a due date for this one sheet to come out. So I can say property field. You can look for inspection. We'll go ahead and say inspection contingency due date is not blank. As long as that field is not blank, then this goes out. We also might have a status that we want to update it to as well. Maybe we want to say EDM has been received. And then after EDM has been received, right? then this weekly one sheet gets applied and that template gets applied to that particular property. So this is just giving an example of how you can build out the triggers and grab the different types of templates now, the commission template and the one sheet. The last place that you can go in and add that on there is if we go to our intake form and we go to our residential contract and we say edit, we'll go to our form triggers. Once we're on our form triggers, we can add another trigger. Same kind of steps that we took for that task, only this is now on the intake form. So instead of it being triggered based off of a task being completed, this can be triggered based off of when the agent has submitted this intake form or when it's been approved internally. Now, my suggestion for this is going to be for if we're talking about one sheets, okay, I want this to be form approved internally. And the reason I suggest that is because we want to make sure that we have not only all of the data, right, updated, added in there, everything looks good for values, but we'll also want to make sure that we have the contacts on there as well. And sometimes we don't receive those contacts until afterwards. Sometimes we're pulling it from Dotloop or sometimes we're pulling it from SkySlope. So if you're using this to bring on your one sheets through your intake form, my suggestion is going to be through form approved. Okay. Now, if we're talking about form submitted, you can totally use that commission for form submitted, right? That commission isn't going to automatically send out to anyone. It's not going to reach out to anyone automatically. So there's no issue having that commission template come on right when the form has been submitted and have that commission template just populated and waiting for you to run with it. Now, there could be some other cases where you could use a one sheet as the form submitted. It just depends. Like I said, usually one sheets have that schedule with them, right? So when I go and take a look at this one sheet, I'm just going to open up this one right here. When we look at that schedule, this is an auto send. So if we set it up as when it's submitted by the agent and that one sheet gets applied, that would be something that I would keep in mind. Right? If we have that one sheet applied, it's due every Tuesday. I don't approve that intake form. We got it on Monday. Tuesday comes around. Does it send out that one sheet? Most likely, because it is the schedule with it. So that's sort of the use case why I would say, let's keep it on approved internally versus having it based off of submission. Went a little deep on there, but that's kind of the best cases, because I know that was a part of the question. Best case scenario or best suggestions. That's what I would suggest. Awesome. Great question. Alrighty, next, can you go over the best way to sync Follow-Up Boss? Does it sync deals to the deal tab? Will it pull contacts from Follow-Up Boss? Yeah, so it just depends. We kind of touched a little bit on it. First things first, we're going to want to make sure that we have that Follow-Up Boss API key here. Once we have that added on here, if we head over to a property, so I'm just going to go to Ivy Lane, unless we want to pull contacts from Follow-Up Boss. We can head to contacts. We can go to API import contacts. Depending on how many connections you have will depend on what shows up here. We can see import .loop contacts. Then we see FUB for implementation demo and FUB for that agent. If I click on for that agent, I can search any contacts that are within that agent and import them on here. So if I type in John Doe, here's John. I can select the email and I can select the contact role with him, or I can just say import. When I bring him in, you can see here that he's brought in with no role. I can set that role at any time. This is how you'd be able to import those contacts. Now, when we're talking about deals, a little different. I'm going to go over to Follow-Up Boss. When we're looking at deals here, we can either attach it to a deal that's already existing in Follow-Up Boss. So if I had any deals here that are already existing, I could attach it. Or I can select if there was a field mapping template for this one. Sounds like there's not one for this one yet. Let's go down to implementation demo because I know that they have a field mapping template. We're going to go ahead and select delete deal for this really quickly. So if we had a field mapping template for this one, here's that field mapping template. I can select the field mapping template. What that's going to do is it's just going to map some of those fields in the deals. We can take a look at what that template looks like in the back end. You can choose the stage at which you want to put it in. So it's very similar to the stages that we have here. Once I select that stage, I can scroll down, enter in the last information, and then select add deal. And that's going to push the information from open to close, that deal from open to close into Follow-Up Boss, and it connects the two. Like I said, I can also attach the deal if I already have it attached. Now, I know that my follow-up boss is running into a little bit of an issue right now. I do need to refresh that connection, but to do so, I'd have to stop screen sharing, go find my API and refresh that. It's a lot of steps. I probably don't want to do that on call with you guys right now, but this is how we push over that information and sync the deals together. Now, to take a peek at that API field mapping template, because we do have a follow-up question, what is a field mapping template? How do we create it? We're going to head down to our hammer icon. We're going to head into templates, and we're going to head down to our API field mapping template. Once we're in our API field mapping template, we can select add new. Here, we're going to choose an API. So I can say follow-up boss. Here for choose API, I can say deal if I want to sync for the deal, or contact fields if I want to sync for the contact fields. Contact fields are going to be specifically the custom fields on this particular client. So here underneath custom fields, this is what it's referring to. So some of these fields here are fields that we don't necessarily have or use, right? Spouse's name in open and close, we don't track the spouse's name as a field. We have them instead as usually a contact on that property occasionally. Same thing with like I believe that there's a birthday, right? Usually we have that as like underneath a contact. Same thing with the license number. Usually that's under a contact, right? Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you have that field, you're tracking it, but usually that's underneath a contact. So just keep that in mind when you're selecting which one you want to do. I'm going to go ahead and say close because I already created 2 today. Here's that field 1. If we select edit on it, here we can see all of those same values that I showed you guys before. It's going to be these custom fields here. Everything on the right-hand side is going to be follow-up boss. Everything on the left-hand side is going to be open to close. When we're going through and we're associating these together, right, we're going to want to make sure that when we make that first selection, so commission, I'll type in commission. Oop. Commission, depending on which one I select here, I might want to say, total commission net amount. And now that is going to map over that total commission amount. Going back up, I'm going to click on field templates, just going to take me back to that first screen. We're going to click on edit for the deal sync. And for the deal sync, it's kind of similar. It's got similar fields. Not exactly the same fields, but it's got very similar fields, the fields that are going to show up underneath those deals. I don't have any deal cards to show you guys. I could probably add one on here to show you guys here. Here's an example of the fields that it wants to pull in. I can say show all fields, and here's the custom fields that it wants to bring in. It's the same custom fields here. So we can see earnest money amount, earnest money amount. Let me know if there are any more follow-up questions on that. This is where you'd want to set that up. Now, when we're talking about setting up our deal API field mapping templates, when I select the API and I select what type it is, I have to select what team member I'm talking about as well. So am I talking about a team member, or am I talking about an agent? If you guys are the owners of your follow-up boss account, and you are planning on syncing it with one specific follow-up boss account, it should be okay for you to just have that one that's created. So for example, I just have the one implementation demo. Now, if you need to sync it directly with a specific agent, you will want to create an API field mapping template for each one of those agents. If you noticed here, I have them built out for implementation demo, right? API implementation demo. When I go to that property and I go over to follow-up boss, and I click on, our agent, or here agent, the deal sync is going to be the easiest one to see. We can see here that they do not have their API field mapping template set up yet. Here, sorry, not that one. Here, we can see that there's no API field mapping template set up. So you'll definitely want to set them up per agent as well if you need to. Alrighty. Next question we have, how do I add an email alias? What are its limitations? Then how do I send an email from my email alias? So first step for adding in an email alias is going to be, depending on who you're using, I'm going to assume, and we're going to go down the route as if you're using Google. I already have searched this up recently. Google, I'm going to go to Google's version of how to add or remove an email alias. I'm going to go ahead and grab this link and I will drop it in the chat for anyone who is curious. If you guys are looking to create an alias, my best suggestion is to follow Google's documentation if you're using Google. And if you're a Microsoft user, you can just type in Microsoft aliases, how to add in aliases. Email aliases are just different versions of your email. So here you'd follow through the steps. So here, add an email alias for a user. This is how you'd add that on there. Now within my open to close account, if I head down to our gear icon and I go into email addresses, here's an example of the email aliases I currently have associated with my Google account. I have a Hannah Hoxie at open and close. That's my traditional email. I've got a Hannah Hoxie at Workflow Boss, and I've got a Hannah at opentoclose.com. So these are the 3 different aliases that I have currently. Your aliases do not have to have your name included in it. Your alias could be team at open to close. It could be team at team.com, whatever it needs to be, you can have that added in there. It's just a matter of going through the steps here and following the steps that Google will prompt you to get that alias in. Now, sending it from an alias. Right now, I have my default, so all of my properties should be sending from hannah.hoxie at opentoclose.com. If I needed to send it from the Workflow Boss one or just the Hannah one, what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to navigate to the property. If I'm sending a one-off email, I can just head to emails. Once I'm on emails, I can select my email from my drop-down here. So here you can see it shows me the other aliases, my non-API, and it shows me that Microsoft email I have. I can just select Hannah at open to close. When I send out that email, because it is an alias, a copy of that is going to go back into my sent email box. Okay. So if I send it out through Hannah Hoxie, and that's the same alias as for Hannah.Hoxie, when I send out that email, it's still going to keep a copy of that in my sent email box in Gmail. Okay. So that's one of the cool ways with it. If I wanted to say that this was the standard, actually, for this particular property, I don't want them to know my last name. Hannah at open to close is perfect. We're going to head to our little drop down arrow here. We're going to go to our defaults and settings. We're going to scroll down until we see send default email from, and then we'll select our send default email from here. So I can say Hannah at open and close. Once I've selected that, now when I go to send out any of my triggers or my emails, as long as I have use property default send from email address selected, it's going to send it out from there. So if I go to my task, let's go ahead and click on this trigger. Looks like this is an email. We'll go ahead and say inspect. Here we can see who it's sending to. Here it shows us the information for it. If I click on edit and render this particular email, here at the top, we can say it says use property default send from address. What this is usually set on is this is set on the email template itself. So all you'll really need to do is make sure that you've updated that default email address underneath here if you need to update it for that property. And then that's going to update it for all future emails that are going from this particular property. As far as for limitations, there's not many, if any. It depends on what you're wanting to do with it. It's a lot easier for me to say what the limitations are. If you say, I want to do this, can I? Then I can give you an example of what the limitations are. As of right now, there's not too many limitations. I believe with creating an alias or having an alias within open to close. If you do add in new aliases and you head to your email addresses or you head to that property and you do not see that alias in there, you're just going to want to click on resync email address. And what that's going to do is it's going to pull in those email addresses again. It's going to refresh them. It's going to pull in any fresh ones that you've added in there. Awesome. Alrighty, let me see if there's any follow-up. Okay, so one of the follow-ups is, when do you need to use an alias? Whenever you'd like to use an alias. It's a really, really hard question to answer because it depends on what your use case is, right? Some of you guys might have it where everyone has their own, Google, right? You have a Google Workspace account. You have 3 users on it. Each one of those users is connected into open to close. Each one of them has their Google set up. And maybe when you send out some emails, you want it to come from a team at opentoclose.com email. That would be an example of when you could add in an alias to each one of those team members. And then within open to close, if you need to send out an email and it needs to be from team at open to close, you can have that as an option to select from here. Now that kind of setup is a pretty long setup to go through. If anyone's interested in setting up something like that, definitely feel free to reach out to us in support and we'll kind of set you on the right path on how to get that started. I don't see too many of our users using that though. Usually our users want to have that information sent out to them. All right, next question. Can you explain how task conditions work? Sure. I actually have a condition on one of my tasks. I'm going to head to my templates first, into my templates, into my task templates. I'm going to head down to that buyer's under contract one. And the first task that I have on here, I'm going to go ahead and click on this little drop down and go down here. I have this task right here. And this task says send opening emails. Purchase contract FE exists in the property. This is a condition. The reason I have this condition is because when I send out my emails, maybe I need that purchase contract FE to be attached to an email. And if without it being in the property, I don't want this task to be able to be checked off. I don't want my emails to fire off. That's an example of how you would use a task condition. Task conditions work the same way as all other conditions. When I select add condition, I can choose either a property field, a file role, or a contact role. So I can go up, head out of my template editor, head on to, let's go ahead and go to, I want to say that Ivy Lane has our opening email still. See if we have it on here. We do not. Okay, so here's an example of that opening emails, right? What happens when I try to check it off? Not only does it say the subtasks need to be completed, so here I can complete all the subtasks, but also if this particular condition was not met, let me go ahead and add a condition that's impossible for this one to show you guys what that looks like. We'll go ahead and do file status is equal to terminated. So here's an example of a condition that's not going to be met, right? Because technically this is under contract. It's not going to be terminated. But if we had a condition that was not met, here we can see this as file status equal to terminated. When I try to check off this task, it will not allow me because it has not met the conditions. So these conditions here can allow you to prevent your teams from just checking off tasks and having emails go out. Maybe we need to make sure that, you know, something has been updated, a file has been added, a contact role exists on the property, a field has been updated, something like that. As long as we have those conditions on there, that's going to prevent that team member or team user from checking off that task until we meet the conditions. Once the conditions are met, I'm going to go ahead and remove that condition. It's going to be that gray color. If I go over to my documents and I search for my purchase contract, here we can see that purchase contract FE. The file role is associated. A file is actually existing here, and that's the reason why it meets the conditions. So now if I tried to check off that task, it would mark that task as completed. It would send those triggers up to the health bar, and I could go on my merry way. Let me know if that makes sense, or if you want another example of a task condition. All right, we've got another question here. I have been editing all templates, tasks, etc. from our main team lead account. However, our TC will be using OTC mainly. Will they see all these changes, or will they need to be edited in her account? To be clear, whenever you make changes, let's say I'm the admin and I make changes to my task templates, email templates, all of this, any other user on my team is going to see those changes as well. Okay, so Rory, if I make a change to the intake form, Rory's going to see that change to the intake form as well. So if your TC is on your account as a team member here, they're going to be able to see those changes as well. If your TC has a completely separate account, in other words, they log in and when they go to team members, they don't see you here. It's just them. They're not going to see those changes because technically that's a completely separate account. So as long as you're a user on that account, you're going to see the changes. But if you're not, and you have your own solo account, you're not going to be able to see those changes because that's a different account. Let me know if that makes sense. All right, I understand how to create file roles and contact roles. Can you please explain how to apply them and what's their best use? Absolutely. File roles and contact roles are extremely crucial to your build. So having those set up is really, really crucial. One of the things that Andrew always shares, and it's something that I share too, when you guys get started with using open to close, the first thing that you're going to look at is your fields. And then you're going to take a look at your contact roles and your file roles. And the reason that's so important is your contact roles are your party members. Those are the people that you're working with. This is how you're determining who is who on this particular transaction and within your database. So if you add someone and they don't have a contact role, then they're not going to receive email communication. You might not be able to send them an invite, depending on who they are. You might not know who they are without that contact role. So when we talk about contact roles, I definitely suggest adding in each version of that, of the party members that you work with, and then also possibly adding in, sorry about that. Also adding in the different kind of ways that you might communicate with them as well. So for example, here I've got a buyer. I only need one buyer within open to close. This is the best practice, right? We don't need to have a buyer 1, buyer 2, buyer 3, buyer 4. Only one buyer is good enough. When we have multiple buyers on a property, it's going to go based off of how you have those buyers listed out. So for example, if we have Hannah, Jill, and Emily as buyers on a property, and let's say Emily is the main person to talk to on this. Emily is the person that you guys are mainly working with. All you would want to do is make sure that Emily was ordered first on that property. So when we're looking at that property and we're looking at those contacts here on this, if I wanted, let me see my buyers. I've got 3 buyers here. I've got Hannah, Justin, Anna, and Ghazi. Let's say I wanted Ghazi to be at the top of that list for buyers. I would just want to make sure that Ghazi's name is at the very, very, very top of the list. This property has a lot of contacts on it right now. If I make sure that she's at the very top of the list, when I send out an email to all of the buyers and it greets the buyers, it's going to say, hello, Ghazi, and Ansel, and John, and Lori, and Levi, and Hannah, to show you an example of that. That's actually really funny that it has so many on there. Let's go ahead and grab a template. Let's go ahead and grab our intro email, because I know that this one says hello to buyers. Intro email to buyers. We'll say apply. Here's what that looks like. Ghazi, Ansel, John, Lori, Levi, Hannah, Justin, Anna, and Han. So this is how it lists it out. That's why we don't need more than one buyer contact role. Now, the other options, the other contact roles that we have in here are CC on all buyer emails and a BCC on all buyer emails. That CC on all buyer emails, that can be used to, let's say Jill and Emily were helping me purchase a home, but I'm the buyer. So when you reach out to me, you're going to say, hi, Hannah. And then you might have Jill and Emily as CC on all buyer emails. That way they're getting copies of those emails so they can help me out with me purchasing my home and keep me on track of things. They can just see how the transaction's going, but they're not necessarily being greeted on that transaction. It's the same thing with our other options. Here we've got that CC on all lender emails. We also have an attorney assistant. Again, it can be used either or. You can have it that, oh, well, you know what? Actually, they're not the attorney assistant. They're the paralegal. So they need to be CC'd on all the emails, but I don't have a role specifically for paralegal, right? So you could say, well, they're CC on all attorney emails. And then that way they receive the copies of it, but they're not necessarily being greeted on that email, unless you want to use that contact role for that. That's an example of how you'd want to use those contact roles. Again, when we're looking at our contacts within open to close and we go to that contact, we can set the contact role here as a standard for every single time that Pam Beasley or Pamela Beasley is added to a property. She's always the appraiser. We can also have contacts without a contact role. Let's see if I've got one. Let's see if this has no role. Perfect. So Queen Amidala does not have a contact role associated with them. Here we can see that it says none. If we click on that, we can add one. The reason why I suggest having none on Queen Amidala is if she was let's say our buyer agent or our listing agent. When we add her to a property, we want to decide whether she's the buyer's agent or listing agent on that property, not necessarily in her contact role, because this could change, right? If we set her standard as the buyer's agent every single time, when we add her to a property where she's the listing agent. So for example, I'm going to go to this particular property. We're going to search for that contact and add them on here. We're going to want to select that role here. Oh, I need to find the listing agent. Perfect. She's actually the listing agent on this property, or maybe actually she's the buyer's agent. And this makes it a lot easier if you have no portal role selected here. It's kind of a prompt for you, right? One of the things I say is when you get started in your transaction, you're going to be a field filler, you're going to be an email reviewer, and you're going to be a document filer, right? Well, part of that email reviewer is also making sure that your contact roles are set up appropriately on those party members. Now that I've done the deep dive on contact roles, let's talk about file roles next. So file roles. File roles are how you're tracking those documents within open to close. File roles are really powerful tools that can be used to automatically attach documents to different emails. It can also be used to set up conditional logic. So if we have this, then what happens next? We can also use it in conditional logic for our intake forms, for our task templates like you saw. We can use it for our smart blocks. File roles help you track those documents. What we usually suggest is having each version of your documents within open to close. So as you can see here, we've got an addendum 1 BS, an addendum 1 SS, an addendum 1 FE. BS stands for buyer side, SS stands for seller side, FE stands for fully executed. So with these contact roles, when they are applied to those particular placeholders, if we go to a property, we can see it. If we go to documents, if it's applied to a placeholder, it's going to have a little fire icon. What this means is that when you upload a file to this, as long as that fire icon is associated with it, if I needed to send this affiliated business agreement out through an email, let's say through one of my triggers, as long as I have that connected through my email template. So I'm going to head to email templates now. Let's go ahead and go to this one. Scroll to the bottom. As long as I say that business attachment, affiliated business agreement, and we can say either the newest one that's been uploaded, all that matches the main file, or the oldest one that matches the main file. It kind of depends. I usually say stick with all if you need to. There are different scenarios for that, but we can say add. And what this will do, as long as that file role is associated with that file, and that file is on that property, it's going to automatically upload to this email. And that makes things a lot easier when it comes to kind of connecting things automatically. Alrighty, that's kind of as deep as I want to go on file roles. If you have any more questions, we do have that previously recorded training on documents. Same thing with contact roles. We have a previously recorded training on contacts that go a deeper dive in it. Let me know if you guys are interested. We can definitely share that as well. Our next question is, can you explain the property widgets and how it works, please? Yes. So are we referring to the widgets here on the dashboard? Yes. Okay, awesome. So here, some of you guys might not have widgets set up just yet. So I'll go ahead and exit out of all of them. We have different widgets here. These widgets are just giving you kind of like an overview of what your property or how your property, or sorry, how your account is doing. We can add on property history, contact history, intake submissions, unapproved documents, triggers by priority, and property notifications. Typically what I have set up, I don't really care about my contacts. I don't really need to see my contact history, if I'm being honest with you. Unapproved documents, I like to have that one here. Property notifications, I don't really care about the property notifications too much either. My main priority focus is going to be my triggers, my property history, so the last properties I've been clicking on, my intake submissions, and my unapproved documents. So if I had any unapproved documents, they would show up there. Usually I see people have their setup similar to this. Sometimes you can still bring on that contact history if you need it. If we click it on there, it'll just bring it down, or we can just bring it down to the bottom here. Because again, for me, contact history is not super crucial. I don't necessarily need this widget all the time, but if I needed to take a peek at it, I can scroll down to it. The intake form submission shows you all intake forms that are assigned to you. The triggers by priority will show you all triggers that are either due today, due in 1 day, or due in 2 days. This is a really great place to just be like, okay, no red before bed. That's what Andrew's best practice is. I want to make sure that I complete all of my triggers. Obviously, this isn't a great example. I have 92 triggers. I'm in deep trouble with the amount of red that I have before my bed. But here we can see, it shows us the emails, it shows us template triggers. It just kind of depends, and we can execute them or send them from here. depending on what I need. Below that, we have our property history. This just shows the last 25 properties we've looked at. So if you're like, Hannah, I entered in a property, but I can't find it, and I'm looking at my property history and it's not there, just keep in mind it only shows the last 25. If we want to search for it, we're going to want to search up here in the search bar. I typically suggest if you guys are working in smaller volumes, you can have it set to all, and you can search for your smaller volumes. If you're looking at, if you have, let's say, 1,000+ properties in your system, go ahead and search it based off of properties if you're searching for a property. And if you're looking for a party member, go ahead and search for party members. The reason we set this up here so that we could search it by properties and contacts or all is so that it would be easier for you guys to go through and be able to search. Unapproved documents, pretty straightforward. It's where the unapproved documents come in. If there were any, we'd be able to select them and go to them. Property notifications is also going to be what has been updated on this property. Documents that have been received, we can click on the property. It'll take us to it. If we exit out of it, it'll go back to our dashboard. We can also mark these as red. So if I know that these notifications are good, I can mark them as red. Just kind of depends on what you need. I usually don't have property notifications or contact histories on my dashboard. Usually this is the stuff that I find most crucial and most important. And you guys will probably see, usually I have my property history up there, my trigger by priority, intake submissions, and unapproved documents. Alrighty, last question. Please explain the difference between calendar days, skip landing, holidays, and business days. When should I use calendar days? It just depends. That's a setting that's in a couple different places. It's on tasks. It's on date templates. I want to say it's on a couple other areas. Let's go ahead and take a look at it on a date template first. So I'm going to head down to my hammer icon into templates. I'm going to go down to date template, and I'm just going to click on our contract to close date template. And I'm going to go ahead and add in another date that I have. Let's go ahead and click on I don't know what's already on here. Let's go ahead and add a photography appointment date. So when we're talking about the time frame, right, this is going to be the type. Business days is obviously pretty straightforward as business days. Calendar days is going to be counting calendar days. And then calendar days, skipping landing weekends. I believe the skip landing weekends, what that means is that if we still want to count calendar days, but we don't want that due date to land on a weekend, right? So in some cases, people might have it where it counts based off of calendar days, and it lands on a Saturday, and that's the day that you do it. There also might be a case where you say, we need to skip that weekend, right? So we're still counting calendar days, counting Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then when it comes to Friday, if it was going to land on Saturday, it will push it to that following Monday. Okay. So that's the idea behind it. It just depends on how you guys calculate. What I would do is rely on what your contracts say. Looks like we have some additional. Yes, Jill, go for it.
I was just going to add, you're right on the right track. So one of the states in their contract, it says, we count days using calendar days. However, if the final day of that period falls on a weekend, it goes to the next day, so to Monday. So we count the days, but we just can't end on that day, if that makes sense.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so Jill is quoting directly from a contract where it says that. So definitely rely on your contracts and what they say as far as for your date calculation, whether it should be counted by business days, calendar days, or calendar days skipping weekend. It looks like we have another follow-up question with this, which is which should I use for federal holidays? It depends. Again, I would rely on your contracts. Do you need it to roll forwards or roll backwards? Usually what I suggest is whatever you set here for roll backwards, it's going to also set it for the weekend roll here. So again, if it's a skip landing on weekends and we have it set to roll backwards, instead of it landing on that following Monday, it would land on Friday. If we have it saying roll forwards and we say skip weekends, it's going to land on that Monday, or it'll land on a Tuesday. For example, we had Labor Day this past Monday. So if I had this set up the way it is set up right now, and it was counting and it was supposed to land on, let's say Saturday, and needs to push forward, it can push forward to that Tuesday. Awesome, Todd. Yes. And that is a great addition as well. Holidays are now configurable in your system. We're going to head down to our gear icon, into our global settings. Once we're in there, I believe it's under, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm probably going to click, oh, federal holidays. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Under federal holidays, you can add in your own individual federal holidays. So stuff that might be custom to your state or even to your province, depending on where you're located. You can add in those specific holidays here. So you can see here, we've got firm dates, December 25th, and then for Thanksgiving, 4th Thursday in November. So here's an example of some of those days. I'll go ahead and leave it on this screen. We are just at about time. If anyone else has any questions, definitely feel free to drop them in the Q&A, and we'll get to them. If not, I'll go ahead and let you guys go for today because it is 12 o'clock. Thank you, Todd, for mentioning the federal holidays. I know that this is a feature that came out a bit ago, but it might be some new to some of you guys. It's always good to have a refresher and remember, like, hey, we have this cool thing now. Don't forget about it, especially since our holidays have kind of shifted around, right? Awesome, guys. Well, thank you for joining me today. So as far as for like next steps or like what's available, obviously you can chat with us here, reach out to us, send us a message here if you need more help or if you have any questions that we didn't get today. If you're looking for extended learning, you can go to our Learn tab on Open to Close and go to Webinar. Each one of these webinars is available for anyone to join, so feel free to join us. They're free. Next week, we're going to be going over intake forms, property templates 101, and next Wednesday, we're going to be going over using Open to Close 101. I really, really suggest having any TCs who are new join using Open to Close 101. We're specifically focusing on the front end. We're focusing on property tables and table task pipeline. We'll talk about setting up our email signatures, making sure our email's set up correctly. It's really, really helpful for all new users to join and kind of see like, how do I use the system or what are some best practices? It's also good for people who, maybe you've been using the system for a while and you're like, there has to be a better way to do this. It could be a good refresher for you as well. Alrighty, guys, thank you so much. Hopefully this cough goes away next week so that I'm not leaning to the side and coughing on you guys. I appreciate everyone. I appreciate all the questions. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will talk with you next week.